Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the sports session of the 2022 PyeongChang Peace Forum. My name is Jinho Kim, and I will be serving as the moderator today. I have been covering affairs on the Korean Peninsula and also international affairs, and I have worked as a journalist for over 30 years. Before we begin today's session, one of the two speakers today is a Ukrainian, and she was not able to join us in person, and she has provided a video presentation in her stead. But as you know, President Putin has ordered his troops to enter the Donbas region in Ukraine. And there have been a lot of media headlines mentioning the entry or the invasion of Ukraine. Of course, it's not a full-fledged invasion yet, so we cannot say that it is a war at this current point in time. But anyhow, I would like to introduce to you our speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Youngho Nam from Shinhan University. He is going to deliver a presentation on the Irish peace process and role of sports. Professor Nam is an associate professor of Shinhan University, and he was formerly the vice president of the Korean Society for Cultural Anthropology, and he has a PhD in social anthropology from Cambridge.
Hello, I am Nam Youngho, as was introduced. I studied in the UK, and while I was studying there, I had experienced the peace process in Ireland, albeit indirectly. I was not interested in that peace process at the time, but I returned to Korea, and later I was able to study it more. I would like to finish my presentation in 20 minutes, and if I cannot finish on time, I'd like to deal with the remaining content during panel discussion or Q&A. Some of you may not be familiar with Ireland. Why should we be interested in Ireland? Many people think that the Korean Peninsula is the only divided nation, but that is not true. As close as China and Taiwan, they are divided. Of course, China is saying that it's a one China policy, but the Cyprus in the Mediterranean is also divided. Armenia also is divided. So it's not true to say that Korea is the only divided nation. That is a myth. We have to look at the characteristics and also the historical background of the divided nations, and we have to include Ireland. Some people consider Ireland a divided nation, but some people beg to differ, and I will explain later. When we talk about division and unification of the Korean Peninsula, we talk about Germany a lot. There are similarities, but also differences. Germany was divided after World War II because it was a war country, but it was the reverse for Korea. We were occupied by Japan, and after liberation, we were trying to build one nation, but was divided in the course. So it's different from Germany. So we should look at the differences and similarities among the divided nations. I think that would have more implications. And in the future, if the North and South want to do something together, there are certain challenges because the South Korean people outnumber North Koreans, so we should not just rely on democracy by majority. Sports was very important in the peace process in Ireland, and I would like to talk about that also. This is the status of Northern Ireland. We call the UK England sometimes, but England is just one part of UK. The official name of the country is United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So the northern part of the Ireland and the British Isle makes up the UK. So sometimes Ireland refers to just the Irish island. Sometimes people refer to it as the Irish Republic. Some people in the northern Ireland, they are called the Ulster region. They remained as British territory, and they use the British pound in Northern Ireland. But looking at it from the Irish perspective, this is unrational because Ireland has been inherited by the descendants, and it was the British that invaded Ireland and claiming theirs. But Irish were outnumbered, and so there have been many bloody struggles, and more than 3,500 people lost their lives since 1968. Let's look at the historical background. In 1998, thanks to the treaty, the Belfast Treaty, there was an end to the conflicts, but the division is still prevalent in the everyday lives of the citizens. But sports sometimes promoted the peace process and sometimes instigated the conflict. We'll talk about that. And because there is a difference in the populations, structurally, the minorities' voices cannot be heard. So, what is the solution? And Brexit. I don't know if I will have time for that. If I run out of time, maybe I can touch upon Brexit during Q&A. 2 weeks ago, there was an incident regarding Brexit. Starting from the 12th century, Britain invaded Ireland. It was intermittent. Sometimes it was occupying Ireland. And from the 17th century, it made Ireland its a complete colony. Ireland is a Catholic nation, and Great Britain is a Protestant country. And the invasion may have been due to religious reasons, but at any rate, the British government had given the immigrants who went to Ireland the land in Ireland. And so starting from the 17th century, the people who moved to Ireland from England and Scotland were given land. And so they resided in the northern part of Ireland, and they account for many of the people. 60% of the population in the Northern Ireland are from Britain. And in 1921, the southern part of Ireland was liberated. And there was a war between Britain to gain independence. And there were some people saying that they should be able to self-rule. But there was a treaty signed, and on condition that the 6 regions in Ulster was given to Britain, they would gain autonomy. The Irish, less than 30% were Catholics, and they could only lose if there were elections. And so they were the minority. And these Catholics living in the northern part of Ireland were wondering how to solve the relationship between the northern part and how they could ally with the other Catholics in the southern part of Ireland. And there's the IRA, Irish Republican Army, and They were considered a terrorist group from the British perspective, but to the Irish, they were the independence rebels, like the Korean independence fighters that fought during the Japanese occupation. There was a civil war, and there was defeat, and there were a lot of casualties involved on both sides. And there were unionists in Northern Ireland, and they wanted to side with Great Britain. The unionist comes from the United Kingdom, so they're pro-British and they're Protestants. And within the unionists, there were many different factions like UDP and many other parties. And within the Irish Republic, there were many different factions. And the strongest and the most militant was Sinn Féin, which included IRA. And they both have parties in both the north and the south. The peace process was still ongoing, but it did not work because when there was an agreement reached, some of the radicals in either side would break out and claim something else. And there were the troubles starting from the 1960s, and for a while within the faction, it was, like water boiling in a pot. But there were armed conflicts starting in the 1960s and in the 1970s. In the city of Derry or Londonderry, there was a peace march, and the parachute regiment fired against unarmed civilians. And so there were many civilians killed, and about 467 people were killed in 1972. And then the British embassy was attacked in the Irish Republic, and the Catholics were discriminated against in housing and government positions in Northern Ireland. And these are the pictures I have taken. It was in 2017 at Belfast, the capital of Northern Ireland. There is a wall erected, and these walls are not only in Belfast, it's in other cities as well. They divide the Protestants from the Catholics because there are violent clashes. And it says, free all political prisoners. And so you can tell from the graffiti that it's on the Catholic side. And they have elements of socialism. If we get rid of the British, and if we can fly our green flag, if we cannot build a socialist regime, then all our efforts will be in vain. And this is on the Protestant side. So this is a pastor from Scotland, made great contributions. And this is the center of Belfast, Shankill Road. The store is named the People's Army. It's in the center of Belfast. And in the city, there were many British people living there, and in the countryside, there were more Irish people. And Irish people moved to Belfast, and there in the city center, there was the clashes between the Protestants and the Catholics, or the British and the Irish. And this is probably by the Protestants. They want the British people to sign up for the militia, and DUP is one of the Protestant parties, and Sinn Féin is let's destroy them. And Bloody Sunday in 1972 was an unfortunate incident. In Northern Ireland, within the Catholics, they were against these armed struggles, but with bloody struggle within the Catholics, they rose up and sided with the Irish Republic. And these signs talk about we should remember. And Bloody Sunday took place in Derry, and on the map, the official name of the city is Londonderry. But the Catholics erase London and they just call it Derry. But officially, it's on the British territory, so it is marked as Londonderry on the map. The Peace Bridge is laid because they wanted to stop. They wanted them to stop fighting, and this is a civilian house, and they have these signs written on it: "Sign up for IRA," and it says Derry, not Londonderry. So you can tell that this house belongs to a Catholic. And on this post, it is written Londonderry. And so you can tell that this is a neighborhood inhabited by the Protestants. And it says you are now entering Free Derry. These signs are put up in civilian houses, and this was taken about 4 to 5 years ago. Free Derry means, this house belongs to a Catholic. And this says End British Internment on the wall. And this is the pictures while the fight was going on. And there is no British flag because it's mostly the Irish people living here. So there's the Irish flag and the EU flag hoisted. And there were civil rights movement at the time. So the graffiti is about that. And Che Guevara probably expressed his support for the Irish people. And it says, "In my son's veins flow the blood of the Irish rebels." During Bloody Sunday, an 11-year-old boy was killed. He was crossing the street to buy milk, and then a bullet killed him. And this is a commemoration march that was held in 2017, and this is a pub in Derry. If you happen to go to Ireland, please visit some of these Irish pubs. And you see that there's a Cuban flag. So they're fighting against the British Empire, and Cuba is expressing its comradeship to Ireland. And there was the famine in the among the Irish population. So many people had migrated to the U.S., and Paul McStay must have been a leader in Derry. So the Koreans consider ourselves the same people, but the Irish people consider themselves different people. In Ireland, some people consider themselves divided and some people do not. And there's a difference in population, so the minority's voice is underrepresented. What is key is it is not one person getting one vote, but they have consociationalism. So they have the first minister from one side, and then they have the deputy minister on the other side to give equal votes, to give equal representation. The territory of Korea is the Korean Peninsula, and the constitution of Ireland was changed so that the people living in Northern Ireland will be determined by the majority of the people. And there was concession that the British people would surrender some of their rights because they are the majority. And the U.S. and the EU had played as a mediator. Senator Mitchell, during Clinton's administration, had mediated, and the senator said that the key was listening to both sides. And the senator is also of Irish background. This is the building of the Irish Parliament, and I had participated in a guided tour. So on the one hand, politically, so there was an end to some of these violent clashes. And looking at the everyday lives of the people were divided depending on their religions. Children from the Catholic family would attend a Catholic school, and the Protestant children would attend a Protestant church. So while they were in school, even if they lived in the same city, they would be taught different things. So in Catholic schools, they would teach history based on Irish nationalism and calling the British villains who stole our land. But in the Protestant schools, they would say that the land did not have any owners. And so the Protestants came and worked on the land to make it arable. And then we had established schools, government, and democracy and industrialization. So two different things are taught in different schools. And then there are different anniversaries and events celebrated. Orange Parade. It's the biggest festival for the Protestants in Northern Ireland. And then there's the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Could we see a video? I guess the video is not playing, so let me just explain. What I wanted to show in Orange Parade is it's a peaceful march, but you see the police in the background because they want these participants to be humiliated. The young people would burn British flags and throw canister bombs. So this is not entertaining at all. In pubs, in laundry houses, difference between the British cricket and the Irish are saying that this is the fastest sport. And this is an interview from the Irish from the south. And they're saying that an Irishman should be able to play hurling. So it's a very important tradition and sports for the Irish. And the British like rugby and golf, and also hockey and cricket. And the favorite Irish sport is Celtic soccer and hurling. So they play different sports. I guess the common denominator is soccer. And some people had divided the soccer fields between the Irish and the British. So even if in the same city, the soccer fields had been separated. And in Belfast, there are soccer clubs for the British and for the Catholics. They had played home and away games, but for the recent 30 years, they only play in home games to prevent any accidents. And Derry Club, which is a Catholic club, they withdrew from the Northern Ireland Soccer League and are now a member of the soccer league in the Irish Republic. Can sports not instigate the conflict but also resolve conflict? GAA is Gaelic Athletic Association, and it was established as a part of the Irish nationalist movement, but they are now acting as an integrative force. In 2011, Queen Elizabeth was invited to Dublin Croc Park, the headquarters of GAA. To the Irish, the Queen of England would be considered an enemy, but she was invited. And a Protestant school would have no interest in hurling because it's an Irish sport, but you see that the Protestant school is teaching the students the Irish sport. And singing the national anthem before the sports games begin would have caused some discomfort, but now they sing each other's national anthem to pay respect to one another. And since baseball is considered a neutral sport, they're teaching baseball on both sides. And so for 20 years, since 1998, David Mitchell had done a study on sport for peace in Northern Ireland, and many people considered sports to play a positive role between the two sides. But not many people actually participate in integrative sports. If you listen to the interviews, you see that when an Irish player played hurling, a policeman would come and slap you and arrest you. That was in the past, but now everything has improved. And you now see new types of graffiti on the Belfast wall. We have more common elements than differences between the two sides. But still, there are cultural conflicts and divisions. Only 1.3% of the Protestants are watching the Celtic sports on TV, and 20% of the Catholics have watched the GAA sports in stadiums, but only less than 1% of the Protestants have watched the GAA games. And more than 50% of the people say that it's okay to have Protestant-only teams or Catholic-only teams. And hoisting, there was a decision made to limit the hoisting of the British flag in Belfast City Council, and this met a lot of opposition from the Protestants. And still, 93.5% of the students attend Protestant-only or Catholic-only schools, so there has not been complete integration between the two sides. Consociationalism is not democracy by majority. You don't give one vote to one person because the minorities' voices are underrepresented. And if I am given more time, I would like to explain consociationalism further. And this is talking about Brexit. It dates back to 2017. Everyone was against Brexit. And this is the border area, a pub between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. This used to be a fort guarded by the British military. And there was an Irish driver who had to enter this fort with his car full of bombs under the threat of the IRA. So this is where the heavy barricades were. And now there's no actual physical boundary. So if you take your cell phone with you and walk a few steps, then the carrier changes somewhere in the middle. It says, "Welcome to Northern Ireland." And somebody erased this. So this must be somewhere in the border area between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Many people commute between the regions, and you cannot prevent the movement of the people. The UK is no longer part of the EU, so there were many issues that arose with Brexit, and I would like to talk about it later. Now I'd like to conclude. Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Nam talked about how sports could reduce and at the same time cause conflict in Northern Ireland. Thank you for your presentation. Religion, nationalism, these could cause dilemma. So in Korea, we have the same religion and we are one people. But in Ireland, for several decades, hundreds of thousands of people died. During the Korean War, it was more than 3 million people who lost their lives. So for the peace process in Korea, we need to engage much deeper. And now, moving on to the next presentation.
We have the second speaker, who is Ms. Tetiana AKULENKO, who is the deputy chairman of the public organization Golden Mongoose. As you know, about 100,000 Russian troops are sort of pressing the Ukrainians, and they're siding with the Belarus. And the Russian troops have started to close in on Ukrainian territory. So this is actually one of the most watched international incident. And although there is still a slim chance that peace talks may result out of this incident, the residents of Ukraine are afraid of an impending war. So there's a lot of news coming in from Ukraine. And we have a wonderful message from Ms. AKULENKO wishing for peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I think this is very meaningful.
Sports exchanges as a way to resolve conflict on the Korean Peninsula. The popularity of sports, its ability to bring people together, make it a powerful voice for peace at the global and local levels. Sport creates a space for states to engage in intercultural dialogue, facilitate culture exchange, and promote peaceful development. One of the decisive rules in improvement of bilateral relationship between the Korean Peninsula nations as North Korea and Republic of Korea recover from the new wave of the COVID-19 pandemic should be given to international yachts and sports exchange by the governments of both countries. International sports exchanges are an invincible force for the future development of states, creating an atmosphere of peace, development, resilience, tolerance, and mutual understanding. In the context of condition between the two states, governments need to promote cooperation between the institutions of both states in the field of physical culture and sport through of exchange of information, experience of athletes and experts. Sport speaks to young people on their language, supports not only the physical well-being of the age group, but also creates space for young people that promotes mental development. Through the organization of international sports exchange program, states will provide the new generation with a space for the international communication, culture exchange, and interaction between members of the scientific groups. In the same time, the development of sports exchange will contribute to the normalization of inter-Korean relations and strengthen cooperation among countries in ensuring international peace and security. As the director of the Golden Mongoose International Sport Award, I'm convinced that international sports exchange and a global scale carry out peaceful building activities, helping many countries overcome the consequence of conflicts. The DPRK and the Republic of Korea are not exception. Obviously, a well-established system of international sports exchange can guarantee a fundamental change of inter-Korea relations. Each country needs to change its foreign policy course stability in order to do so. However, sport exchange will extend the sphere of influence of global ambassadors of peace and unity. Olympic champions, Asian, world, North Korean Republic of Korea champions. In the way, the spirit of partnership, ethnicity, the potential overpaying intensity, and opportunities for cooperation can become the base for discussion of resolving Korean Peninsula violence. Sport is an icebreaker that opens new ways for the conflicting parties to cooperate in the realization of their respective goals and objectives. Sport is an ambassador of peace. Thank you.
예, 오크랭코 부의사장님의 강연이 약간 강의식이 있으셨죠?
Director AKULENKO delivered a presentation just now, and she has a PhD in international sports law, so she's an expert in this area. I'm sure she knows well what it means to wish for peace on a conflict-ridden land and the importance of sports in promoting sport in peace. So she has sent us a very good message, wishing for greater role of sports in peace building. Now we are going to conduct the panel discussion. We have with us Mr. Heungsik Shim, who is the chief editor of Gyeonggi Shinmun, and Professor Moonsoo Cho from Soongsil University. Mr. Heungsik Shim has received his PhD in communications in Gyeonggi University, and he teaches in Hanyang University and also Gyeonggi University. Dr. Moonsoo Jo has majored in
그럼 먼저
industrial
교수님부터
engineering,
말씀해 주실까요?
and he's a professor at Soongsil University. So may I ask Mr. Shim to deliver his first comments?
온도가 높아서 여러분 반갑습니다.
Hello everyone, I am Heungsik Shim, Chief Editor of Gyeonggi Shinmun. In 2018, I was working with South and North Korea Sports Exchange Association. I visited Pyongyang in 2019. I visited Odessa, Ukraine, along with Mr. Kim Kyung-seok, director of SNKS, because he received the Mongoose Award. It is given to people. It's like the Nobel Prize in sports. It's given to people who contribute to world peace through the medium of sport. And I think Mr. Kim was the first Asian to receive the award. So I was there. The capital of Ukraine is Kiev, and the second largest city is Odessa. Mongoose is present in Odessa, and at the time, I was able to meet with the director and deputy director and the IOC commissioner. In 2018, PyeongChang, in Pyongyang, in 2019, Odessa, these two cities are unstable and peace is being threatened. PyeongChang Peace Forum has the following keywords: peace through exchange. Especially after the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, we want to achieve peace through sports exchange. How can we use sports in conflict-ridden areas and bring about peace? Professor Nam talked about the Irish peace process. He talked about the situation between the Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, the differences in religion, the origin of conflict. It was a great presentation. Looking at the Korean Peninsula, it is divided. There's a lot of confrontation, but at every important juncture, through sports exchange, we are able to show the outside world that we are interested in and we're capable of unification. Since the World Cup in 2002, Asian Games and Olympic Games in the 1980s, 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics, we hosted these events, and every time we hosted these sports games, we were focusing on the message of your choice will make a difference on the situation on the Korean Peninsula. And so that's why the sports figures chose Korea as the venue. And every time there was an opportunity, we would form a single team of North and South Koreans. Of course, we are now, we are still technically at war, but we were able to show the people that we have the will, we are a peace-loving people, and we are determined to go at all means for peace and unification on the peninsula. So how to go about it and how can we use sports exchange? And so I was able to see the Irish example through the presentation. I was in Pyongyang and in Odessa in 2018 and 19 respectively, but access to these cities are blocked and the situation is unstable. In Cambodia, there's the conflict between the military and the minority. And so I hope that peace will soon come in these volatile regions. And moving on. So how to facilitate the exchange in these volatile regions? Looking at the Irish case, I don't think the peace process is complete yet. And Mr. Nam talked about the recent issue brought about by Brexit and what are some of the recent efforts. Professor Nam talked about the religious conflict and the historical conflict and how the people observe the games and play the games separately, and how can we integrate the two sides, and how can we move in a direction that invites peace. I would like to ask that question to Professor Nam. And looking at Golden Mongoose in Ukraine, this is a civilian foundation, and still it acts as a very good focal point because it awards people for their contributions through sports. And as a cosmopolitan living in this age and time, how can we facilitate sports exchange? Ms. AKULENKO talked about sports exchange, especially by the youth, and have closer communication. So Professor Nam, maybe do you have an idea? Maybe not just focusing on Ireland, but through international sports exchange, how can we facilitate the peace process? So these are the two questions I have for Professor Nam. In 1905, Anjungun had murdered Ito Hirobumi of Japan, who tried to annex Korea to Japan. And Anjungun, when he was in prison, wrote a book, The Theory of Peace in the Orient. Japan had a different theory of peace through invasion. A strong nation or an imperialist nation had such a philosophy. Just before his death, Anjungun talked about the horizontal solidarity, and that is the message of peace of the East Asia or peace in the Orient. So you need partnership. We have many conflicts around the world, and we had the situation 120 years ago, and Anjungun talked about the horizontal solidarity. And I hope that through sports exchange, we may be able to reduce the confrontation and bring about peace. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, Professor Cho, would you like to deliver your comments? Yes, I am Moonsoo Cho from Soongsil University. I came here, and we have Mr. Kang Min-seok and Mr. Park Kyung-rak. They have left this book right here for me. And since 2007, I know that as a person who have visited North Korea from time and again, this book of photos really moved me. And the experience in Northern Ireland, I think, gives us a lot of food for thought in the context of the Korean Peninsula's peace building. And I think sports is very important in this regard. And I have majored in industrial engineering, and you may wonder why an industrial engineer is here. But when the young youth football team from North Korea came to Korea, we discussed ways to engage in further exchange. And Soongsil University was originally founded in Pyongyang. So perhaps we could form a sister university relationship. So that's first began from a sports exchange, and then it expanded into a broader sister university relationship. That idea was tabled, but then the COVID-19 came, and so we received the proposal to perhaps visit Dandong in April. But anyway, although this did not come to fruition, these kind of ideas have been exchanged between the North Korean party and us. And Ms. AKULENKO has sent us a very good video message, and I fully agree with what she has said, and we could see how committed she is to peace and to promoting sports as a means of achieving peace. The Ukraine's Golden Mongoose Sports Award is an important opportunity to utilize sports to achieve peace. And sports have always been a very good driver for exchange between different groups and peace building. And I think sports can really help us build better relationship with North Korea. And I believe sports have served as an important bridge linking the two Koreas together. As we prepare for 2024 Gangwon Junior Olympics, we need to think about inviting youth from the poorer nations to help them train and become very excellent athletes. And this can be an important sports diplomacy in which Korea can engage. And I think we need to set a best practice example to promote sports, and we should invite young people from different parts of the world, including from Africa and other parts of the world who have less opportunity. I think this is a moral responsibility that we have. So I don't really have a question for Dr. Nam per se, but these are my comments. Thank you very much. So perhaps Dr. Nam can address the question concerning the Northern Ireland and the role of sports in peace building. I would like to give you maybe 15 to 17 minutes, and then we will also open up for questions from the floor.
I ran out of time and I could not explain some parts of my presentation. During the times when the tension heightened, sports in Northern Ireland was a big part of the people's identity. And this could be a difference between the Irish and the Koreans. Divisions and clashes gone away, and for peace and integration, I think it should be like this. We should be first able to observe the other party's game and then play one another, and then ultimately have an integrated team. But in Northern Ireland, at the community level, I guess you could call it amateur sports. We have these amateur soccer teams. And so what they're doing is they are forming integrated teams. And so these players with different religions and different backgrounds form one single team. And this is inspiring. And I talked about the importance of schools. This is where you learn to play sports. And so they're emphasizing the importance of integrated education. The proportion is low, but it is now rising. So the Protestants and the Catholics attend the same school, they learn the same history, and they play sports together. We are not able to see the video, but the Celtic hurling or Celtic soccer is played by the British and vice versa. And so these are some meaningful gestures. And between Britain and Ireland, sports is also related to class. Rugby and golf is for the higher class. Irish people playing rugby, golfers in Ireland, they're friendly with the British. So there is this class element involved. And so there should be a bottom up approach to resolve these issues. And it was 2 weeks ago in Northern Ireland, since they have the parliament, they were given the self-rule authority from the British, and the parliament has to be formed so that you have the first minister and the deputy minister. And the DUP party has the prime minister, and he resigned because the British prime minister, in the course of Brexit, had formed a boundary between the north and southern part of Ireland. So the British Isle and the Irish Isle, they had drawn a boundary between the two islands. And there's no boundary within Ireland. But, there are some give and take. From the Protestants' perspective, they are considered British, and we are part of Britain. But how can you have a boundary within the country? And so they were protesting that there should be a renegotiation with the EU. So when the Prime Minister resigns, then the deputy minister of the same party should also resign together. But there's another scandal, Partygate, and I don't know how the things will turn out, whether the Protestants' claims would be received. And Sinn Féin, the political organization of the IRA, had opposed Brexit from the very beginning, and they are rising in power. And maybe in the next general election, Sinn Féin of the nationalists would probably be the ruling party. And what implication does it have on Korea? Well, the situation may be different. So watching the others' games and then trying to play the games, vice versa, and then forming an integrated team, I think this could be the step-by-step measure we could take. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nam. You gave us a historical background and also the current situation, and you came fully prepared. I also have a question for Professor Nam. They all look similar to us, but you have this stick and you hit the ball. It's called cricket in Britain and hurling in Ireland. And I think the sports rugby originated from Ireland. The Irish call it Celtic football, but the difference is between, the shape of the ball. It's whether it's round or oval shaped. I think this had divided the people. If you play hurling from the British perspective, you're Irish. And if you play cricket, then the Irishman would call the cricket player a British. So to solve this issue, Professor Nam, you talked about introducing baseball or basketball, which are neutral sports, which are popular among the both parties. So my question is, who initiated the change? Was it government-led, central or local government, or was it a grassroots movement? And another question is, finding another sports to play together, was it well received by the people? In 1958, the military strifes were ended, but depending on the people, it was just a political agreement, and some people don't consider it a grassroots agreement. And to fill the gap, there were other efforts, not at the government level, but at the community level. There's an area called Korimilla, and even when there were clashes, a police officer, when he saw the IRA, the policeman would hide the IRA so that he may not be killed. And you saw the Shankill Road in Belfast. There's the Protestant side and the Catholic side, and people would be aware of one another's existence. But there are people who shelter the other party for protection. And so some of the religious leaders played as mediators. And then there were also female activists who were involved in the peace process. So there was government-led support, but for sports, it was mostly community level and civic society level. So was this proposed by the EU? Or was it voluntary? It was not government-led. Maybe it was the international organization or the EU. So I think it was the neutral third-party institutions that had mediated. But, to people who loved rugby or soccer, you can't just make the other person play baseball or basketball or baseball. So it was symbolic. So yes, you're able to find middle ground.
Ms. AKULENKO, who delivered a video presentation, has not joined us virtually real time. So if you have a question about the situation in Ukraine, you may ask me or the panelists on stage. The PyeongChang Peace Forum is to commemorate the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics, which helped further peace on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, there were many people speculating that there might be a Korean War sometime around 2017, and the situation on the peninsula was quite dire and even risky. But the Winter Olympics really helped us return to a more peaceful state. But a single event will not bring a lasting change. So as we experience winter, even if we have a few flowers, that doesn't mean that the spring has arrived fully. So we need to continue to blossom more flowers so that a more lasting sort of peace can be established on the peninsula. And I think that is the spirit in which we are holding the PyeongChang Peace Forum. So now I would like to open up for questions from the floor. And I would like to have someone to deliver the microphone if anyone raises his or her hand. Well, can I ask a question? about the situation in Ukraine. In the American newspapers, I think the reporting is a little bit biased, and they portray Putin as a person who's crazy about war. And the New York Times, for example, keeps saying that Ukraine needs U.S. assistance and support. But I think the perspective from the U.S., is this the general pervading perspective across the globe? What do you think? Well, I think any media outlet in any country has certain limitations when it comes to their perspective. I have been covering international affairs and also the affairs on the Korean Peninsula, but I have my Korean perspective, and the U.S. media outlets, of course, cover issues from their perspective. And I think the Korean media needs to sort of filter some of the perspectives that are featured in the American press, but sometimes we just without any critical thinking just believe everything that is written by the Western press. Anyway, there are Slavic countries, Eastern Slavic countries include Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. And Kiev is the capital city. And the Russian and Ukrainians actually share some ethnic roots. During Beijing Olympics, when the Ukrainian athlete won the first medal, there was a Russian athlete congratulated that person, and I saw that photograph, and I think it's a wonderful photograph. I hope you also see it. Any questions from the floor? Actually, I have some explanation to provide. As you saw on the video, Mr. Mahomet Makdiv, who's the director of the Mongoose Foundation, also delivered his remarks, and Ms. AKULENKO, who delivered the presentation, she actually wanted to come in person to deliver the presentation, but given the situation in Ukraine, she was not able to come. She wanted to stay in her own country despite the current situation. And I hope that the 2024 Gangwon Junior Winter Olympics will be able to host more athletes from around the world. And I think this is something that the Mongoose Foundation would like to see. I visited Odessa and Kiev a couple of years back. And Odessa is a relatively large city, and Kiev is the capital city, and there is a river, Dnieper River, and it is much wider in width than the Han River in Seoul. It almost looks like a lake. And this river runs the distance of 2,000 kilometers, and it provides water to the farmlands. And the Mongoose Foundation offers huge prize money to the winners, and they provide the ceremonial plaques, and they invite the winners to wonderful meals and nice accommodations, and the Korean representatives also enjoyed such hospitality offered by the Golden Mongoose Foundation. And the Golden Mongoose Foundation has been very generous in promoting sportsmanship. And the Ukraine's cellist from the National Ukrainian Orchestra actually stayed in
근데 오늘 저희 우리
Korea
박재동 화백께서 사파를 그리신
for a while and played.
저도
And there's also a painter from Korea who engaged with this cellist artistically.
첼로 연주자가
And the cellist returned to Ukraine.
전쟁을 해야 되기 때문에
And when he returned, he said, I need to go back to my country because I need to fight this war. But if there is a war in Korea, I can come back and help the Koreans. And so this is the spirit that is held by many Ukrainians. And I think the Golden Mongoose also represents this sort of spirit. We will be hosting the 2024 Junior Olympics.
이번에 끝난 베이징 동계 올림픽도 그런데
And
이런 곳에서는 즐기기
it is very difficult to, enjoy the Winter Olympics where there is little snow, as we have seen in the Beijing Winter Olympics this time around. And so the Minister of Culture, Tourism and Sports
그래서 동계 올림픽에
will
소외지가 없도록
be
그래서 그것을 점차 알려가고
very actively encouraging athletes from around the world, especially from countries where there's little snow, to engage in winter sports. And I think this is something that the Korean authorities should think about.
있습니까?
Are there questions from the floor?
오늘 젊은 학생들도
I guess not. We have many young students in the audience. I guess they are thinking of questions to ask.
그러면은 뭐 이렇게 작년 12월부터
Since December last year, we have been talking about Ukraine. So you may ask questions about Ukraine as well. Why are the Western press talking about the possible invasion? And why did the U.S. State a specific date of Russia's invasion to Ukraine? Since the Second World War, the U.S. president,
지정을 해서 공격을 할 것이다 이렇게
it's
했다 이렇게 말한 적이
the first time that a U.S. president pointed out a specific date
아까 뭐
to predict an invasion. But as I said in the beginning, an invasion is the military of another nation invading another country against their will.
지금은 돈바스
But
지방에는
in Donbass, Donetsk, and Lugansk
인민공화국이
are
14년에
the two republics which had separated, and this was approved by Russia. And so these two republics
러시아 군대가 들어갔고
have welcomed the entry of the Russian army, so there was no fight.
이런 걸 푸틴은
And
평화유지군이라고
President
부릅니다.
Putin called them peacekeeping forces.
우크라이나 정부군과 그
So the possibility of a war,
돈바스 지방의 그
the
자체
two
군대는
republics have their armies, and the Ukrainian
8년째 계속 해오고 있습니다.
government forces have been shooting at each other for over 8 years. But as long as Ukraine does not invade these two republics, I don't think Russia will invade Ukraine. Though I think different interests are at play, so I think negotiation is possible to avoid a war.
분께서는
We have a non-Korean participant sitting in the audience.
Where are you from? 이거 한국말 잘하시는데.
You speak very good Korean. So as a British, maybe you're interested in the peace process in Ireland. Were you aware of the role played by sports? I was just listening to the presentation. I don't think I was able to have a chance to learn it while I was in school.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have a hand up.
I have a question about not a
Could
question.
you
Maybe
identify yourself briefly before
so
you
my name is
start?
Oljas Togizbayev. I'm from Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan.
I'm studying in Seoul National University, sports management. So I have some like I know that PyeongChang Olympic Games 2018, South Korea and North Korea had unified women's ice hockey team, and I just wonder like. So just I have a question like now everybody is speaking about like sports which is famous like rugby, you know, this football and ice hockey, and I think like maybe it is one of the possibilities to find, because like before Korea, North Korea and South Korea was one country united, you know, all together. So maybe to find some sport history professors who can find the archives where you had your games, national games that don't need to explain the. So you have similarities. You can come up with elder population, maybe who's now 70, who played together like elder guys, you know, grandfathers, maybe to shoot, and then approach from that. So to find some connection point between North Korea and South Korea when you was one nation, and then come up with that archives, maybe to bring sport history professors that can explain and then give some background, the basement with some integration point, and then move from that rather than trying to communicate through the modern sports like football or ice hockey or other games. It's just suggestion. I don't know. It is in my mind. I just had this idea because before you was one country, and for sure you had your national games like chess or something. So your national Korean games, not only like this active sports, and maybe you can start from that kind of activities or events, something like this.
예, 좋은 의견이십니다.
Thank you very much for that suggestion. So when I speak Korean, is this being interpreted into English? Yes. Dr. Shim?
측사를 전공하진 않습니다만은
I have not majored in history of sports, but as was mentioned from the floor,
실제 우리가
actually, before we were divided during the Japanese occupation, there was Gyeongpyeong soccer.
평양간에
Seoul and Pyongyang had regular games to play.
지역 대결 이런
So
것들이었는데
it was like a regional contest, and modeling on that, we have SNKS, which has the youth soccer exchange games. For 6 times, we have had soccer games between North and South Korean youth. And even when we were close at war, we went back and forth, South and North Korea. And we had the North Korean athletes come to Chuncheon and played soccer for 10 days, and we had the South Korean players play in North Korea, and we also had a game in a third country like China. Yes, you pointed out a very valid point. We do share a rich history, and we don't have any religious conflict like in Ireland. So yes, that's a very good idea. I think it's very possible. Archery and other sports activities, there are a lot of exchanges. So thank you. To add to that, we have the gentleman studying sports management in SNU from Kazakhstan. And as was mentioned by Professor Shim, North and South Korea like to play and like to watch the same sports.
서울과 평양.
And between Seoul and Pyongyang, we had the Gyeongpyeong soccer games. And as for the winter sports games, North Korea enjoys colder weather. The Daedong River freezes every year, and ice hockey used to be played. I graduated from a high school which had been established in North Korea, and it has a rich history of playing ice hockey on the frozen river of Daedong River. So it's a matter of, providing the opportunity.
So the gentleman from Kazakhstan provided a very good suggestion, which I wholeheartedly agree. And Gyeongpyeong football games actually began from Soongsil University. So from the younger children to the elderly, so people of all ages, they can all play the ko. And it's also a sports. I don't know what it's called in English. It's called go. And so from a young child to an elderly men and women can all play the go. So that is something that can also be part of the exchange. So I think there was a person who raised her hand from Indonesia.
Yes, my name is Okti. I'm from Indonesia. I'm from SNU, Seoul National University also, but the program is from Public Management and Public Sector Reform. And I think this discussion is very new for me, but it's a very new idea. It's a very new idea to I remember that Miss Tetiana AKULENKO said that sport is such a ice-breaking tool to conflict resolution. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And I get a lot of new knowledge from this session. Thank you.
예, 감사합니다. 예, 다른 또 질문이 아니라 이렇게 방금 인도네시아에서 오신 분이 말씀하신 것처럼 코멘트도 좋습니다.
Delivered her comment. It could just be a comment.
가만히 계시면 제가 지목합니다.
I may actually have to point my finger at people to speak up.
예, 우리 젊은 학생들 맨 앞에 계신 우리
We have some young students in the room. Maybe the young student here is wearing glasses.
어떤 걸 좀 학생이신가요?
Are you a student?
예, 죄송합니다. 아이고.
Apologies.
예, 말씀하십시오.
Please go ahead. I have a question. What is the motivation for Russia to invade Ukraine? Well, it's not a very interesting topic, but let me be brief. During President John F. Kennedy, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Why was there such a crisis? Because if there is a Cuban missile, and Russia could quickly attack the U.S., and there was the situation where the countries almost went into a situation of nuclear war. Ukraine and Russia are very close to each other geographically, and Ukraine wants to join NATO. And it has been making attempts to join NATO. But once Ukraine becomes NATO member, it means that the U.S. could potentially set up a missile base in Ukraine and make it easier for the U.S. to attack Russia if need be. And so this sort of threat is what Russia sees as being dangerous to its security, and that is why they are threatening to enter Ukraine. Let me briefly add to that. After the Berlin Wall fell, Germany became reunified. And Gorbachev supported this unification of the two Germanys on the condition that the NATO would not expand its influence further. So it wasn't documented, but it was a verbal agreement. But again, NATO's influence continued to expand because a lot of the European countries in the East joined NATO. And in the case of Ukraine, as was mentioned by Mr. Kim here, is a very important part of Russian history. So for NATO's influence to expand into Ukraine is something that the Russians cannot accept.
Thank you very much. If there are no additional questions from the floor, I'd like to close the session. Before closing, oh yes, we have one person here. Please pass the microphone.
Could you introduce yourself briefly
Thank you very much. My name is Waude Siti Rahmawati Purnama, but you can call me Ayu. I'm from Indonesia also, and from Songkong University. So my question is about if the Korean Peninsula already create the event, like the sport events, the question is who's gonna be the judge of that sport? And the second is, this is not a question, but do you have kind of like story from the previous competitions in PyeongChang Winter Olympics in 2018 when there is a North Korea and South Korea athlete meet together in terms of maybe their dinner and what they are doing? Are they having fun or some kind of that? Thank you.
네. 남과 북은
Thank you
남한과
very
북한은
much. North Korea and South Korea are UN members.
남과 북 간에
So,
국가대표 간에 경기를 한다면
when there's a game between the two national teams, the judge would be a judge with the right qualifications. It could be a North Korean or a South Korean or a non-Korean. A qualified judge will be refereeing that game. And during the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games, a single team was formed in women's ice hockey. So they fought as one. And during the Olympic Games, they shared the same dorm and they trained together. So probably they ate together. And so the history of sports exchange between the two Koreas goes back a long way. They would form a single team or they would enter together under a Korean Peninsula flag, which is not a North Korean flag or a South Korean flag. Thank you. I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
클로징으로 들어갈까요? 그러면
So perhaps we could close this session, but before that, perhaps I can show you 3 photos because picture speaks louder than words. Now, this picture is from February 16th, and this is the situation that occurred during Beijing Winter Olympics. During men's ski, it was ski something, but I don't exactly remember the name of the particular sports. But the gentleman on the right is holding the Ukrainian flag, and he won the silver medal. And that silver medal was the first medal for the Ukrainian athletes during this Olympic. So the other gentleman is a Russian athlete who engaged in the same, who competed against this gentleman. He's congratulating the Ukrainian fellow skier. So again, the person standing in the back giving the other gentleman a hug is the Russian athlete. And they look very friendly. On February 16th, that is the day on which President Joe Biden announced that there is an impending war in Ukraine. But during the Olympics, sportsmen engaged in friendly activities together, congratulating each other. So there's another picture here. Do you remember this picture? Maybe many of you have seen this. This is from the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics when a unified Korean women's ice hockey team competed. And that is a picture of the cheering squad. And the slogan here says, "We are one nation." And that was just about 3 years ago, and yet it seems like it's been ages. And I hope that in 2024 we can see something similar. And the lady from Indonesia asked a question about this, but actually in the 2024 Junior Winter Olympics will be held, and there will be all athletes from all countries will join the competition. The NOC, the African National Olympics Committee, they represent 55 countries. And as you know, in Africa, there is very little snow, there is very little ice, so winter sports is not something that's easy to do. But there are athletes, maybe a couple of athletes in each African country who are pursuing a sports career in the winter sports. So they wish to join the 2024 Junior Winter Olympics. So we would like to invite them to Gangwon province. And Gangwon province is actually divided into the Northern Territory and the Southern Territory. And so there is this effort to invite these African young athletes to train winter sports on the Korean Peninsula. So I think there are some very shocking incidents that have been unfolding in Ukraine. And I think we were able to take a look into that and also look into the opportunities for sports to contribute to peace building. Thank you very much for joining us in this session.